Hey guys, welcome back to the second video of today, and I feel compelled to make this one because after the market update, rightfully so, a lot of folks were completely shocked by what the data showed, and they feel like this does not match our experience at all. So in order to answer the question that I know will come in the form of emails, whether this is a good time to finally enter the trucking industry, let's talk about what is actually going on. Is it really getting better, or is the data just a mirage? We're going to unpack the biggest things that have been happening in 2025 to try and figure out whether this industry is actually showing signs of life. Ready? Let's go! So again, the market update today was predominantly about how the spot market is showing signs of life. And according to the data, it is. We are seeing volumes increasing, we're seeing rates increasing, but something that we must always remember is that data is simply a snapshot in time. It takes average numbers without explaining how those numbers came to be. And in order to figure out whether the trucking industry is actually improving, it's very important to know the why of those numbers. So let's dig deeper. First up, we have those tariffs. In Q1 of 2025, trucking activity at the port of Laredo, which happens to be the busiest land port in the US, jumped 48.5% year over year. Now that sounds amazing. It sounds huge, right? Because the data is showing an increase of 48.5%. And in the last week of March, that port hit record high activity levels. Now, some folks obviously pointed at that and said, see, freight is booming, because they were looking at the data without asking the question, why? Now, what actually happened is that even though the data showed such growth, it was more of a panic move rather than a sustainable trend. Shippers were front-loading imports, rushing to get goods across the border before those tariffs hit. In short, it was the tariff uncertainty that drove that short-term spike. And the question is it going to stick? So again, here the data looks amazing, but if you dig a little bit deeper and ask yourself, why is this happening? You realize it's just a snapshot in time, nothing more, and it doesn't mean that the freight market is booming. Now let's shift to another amazing piece of news about the trucking industry, and this has to do with the folks that are keeping this industry alive, owner-operators. Overdrive recently dropped a piece saying that freight signals are encouraging and that owner-operators are seeing an increase in their income, believe it or not. It sounds incredible, but then you ask yourself, what? This is not matching my experience. Well, here's where it gets tricky. The podcast dug into these numbers, and what they found was actually owner-operators saw a decrease in their revenue in 2024, but their net income edged up. So how is that possible? They simply tightened their belts. They started living leaner. They cut their costs and got more efficient. Now, the ATBS called this move a sure sign of success for those who adapted. They also mentioned that flatbed rates actually saw a small uptick in 2025, especially after tariff fears juiced demand. So is this the kind of improvement we were looking for? Well, not so fast. First of all, a slight income bump after years of decline is not quite a victory lap. It's survival. Second, the flatbed boost is tied to the tariff uncertainty like we talked about before. And only time will tell if this holds. And third, this is an average because it is data. For every owner-operator who has managed to cut those costs and survive that way, there is another owner-operator who is drowning in those costs or losing loads to mega carriers. Look, I'm not saying efficiency is bad, not at all. I think it's fantastic that there are people who figured out a way to survive this market. As you guys know, I had to cut a ton of costs in order to help our company survive. But the reality is, if this industry was improving, we would see revenues up, gross income up. We would see more consistency in the freight market as well in terms of rates and volumes. Instead, it's like the owner-operators are running a marathon with weights on their ankles. The data is encouraging only if you squint. And even then, it's more about grit than growth. And finally, we have to talk about the elephant in the room that has been mentioned under the market update as well, bankruptcies. According to a recent report from FreightWaves, a ton of logistics and trucking companies are hitting the wall. Companies like CNC Freight Network, Best Choice Trucking, Best Logistics Inc., they all filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy recently. That's not a one-off, it's becoming a pattern. Now, there are going to be people who think, okay, some companies filing for bankruptcy doesn't mean the whole industry is tanking. Yeah, that's a fair point, but this is not isolated. We've seen giants like Yellow Corp collapse in 2023. And more recently, the one everyone's talking about right now, LTI Trucking in Illinois. And that FreightWaves article isn't mincing words. The industry is facing a brutal reality check. Rising costs, low freight rates, no matter what the market update says. The dry van saw an average of $1.89 per mile on average, including short and long hauls. In this kind of market, yeah, it's gonna squeeze a lot of companies dry. So where does this leave us? Well, on paper, if you look at the data, 2025 is starting off amazing. There are a ton of bright spots like the cross-border surge, the income rising for owner-operators, and maybe a flicker of hope in the freight market because there was 1 week where the data showed increasing spot rates and increasing volumes. Yeah, on paper it looks fantastic, but if you scratch the surface a little bit, the story is completely different. Bankruptcies are piling up. Tariffs, we don't know what's going to happen. It's uncertainty, and the surge we saw could very well be panic. And owner-operators making more, that is just them trying to keep their head above water by cutting all the costs they can. The data might tease improvement, but the reality is it's stagnation dressed up as progress. So the point is, no, you are not insane. You're not living in a different reality than everyone else if you saw that your week last week was absolutely horrific while the data is showing some increases in rates and volumes. Data is just a snapshot in time, and it never answers the question of why. So yeah, guys, I hope that cleared some things up. Again, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.